First of all, people definitely don't like change. Change is never over. That's like the main aha. It's constant, and I often say, to people that it's the number, that don't think that leaders aren't concerned with change, because they are always concerned with change. And what I see is that it's really, in today's environment, helping people get aligned so that they can quickly and with strength cope with change is probably one of the most important strategic advantages you can have.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Our special guest today is Janesse Bruce. She is the CEO of MQ. I won't try to pronounce the full name of the company, but we will put that into the show notes. meQuilibrium. I probably messed that up again. But what's really important about this conversation is looking at how to get team alignment. If you're ever thinking about what's missing inside of this, it's probably one of two things. It's either trust or communication. And we talk about both of these things, we unpack them, and we really look at both of the elements that allow us to create the kind of team alignment that allows us to navigate through all the change, because we know this is constant. Getting to team alignment was the core of today's conversation that I hope you find interesting, because it helps you grow your business the way you want to. When you think about growth of your business, make sure that you're evolving as a CEO. A lot of people aren't quite sure of how their leadership team is performing. We've got some tools that allow you to really get an aspect of that you've never had before. We use 6 dials. We've done hundreds and hundreds of these sessions where we help people understand where they're performing well, where their opportunities for improvement are, how to prioritize this, and dive even a little bit deeper to get to the real core of it and to develop a plan to do that. We call this the leadership performance evaluation. The leadership performance evaluation will give you clarity about who you are as an organization and about leadership. We can focus this on your leadership team specifically if that's the main focus, or we can actually focus it on the entire organization so that you get a better picture across everyone. Either way, you get the leadership performance evaluation. Is an absolutely free thing for you. If you're listening to this podcast, it's probably won't be free for long. So take advantage of it. If it's coming out, just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call today. When you think about, you evolving to the next level, it takes probably some outside perspective. It isn't just your own thoughts. I'd love to help you be that force multiplier, if you will. Now, here's the interview with Jan. Jan, how are you?
I'm fine, Gene. How are you?
Great. We're going to talk about team alignment and the change that we go through as in our organizations to get there. Before we unpack that, let's talk about your company. We just went over this. Let me make sure I get it right.
meQ or meQuilibrium.
meQuilibrium. Okay. So tell us about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, in a nutshell, we help people grow. People in the workforce, we help them understand themselves so they can cope and adapt to change, transform in the midst of change. Under the hood, meQ makes it possible for organizations to understand the risks and opportunities that their people are facing so that they can become resilient to these changes and these risks.
Well, I think a lot of organizations are wondering how to lift our sense of resilience. Mm-hmm. So, Jan, why did you guys begin to focus on this as a focus for your business?
Yeah, and we started about 12 years ago, Gene, and we had no idea that fast forward. At the time, I was really struck by how stressful work was becoming for people. Managers and leaders, really, sort of high-performing people often had access to executive coaches, but the guys on the front lines, people that were in, duking it out day to day in high-strain jobs, call centers, technology, distribution jobs, they had no access and support. And we felt that we wanted to democratize the ability for people to sort of become adaptive in their thinking, so they could cope better with stress and the stress of work and constant change. And I'm not going to go on for half an hour, but basically the what made that possible is that we developed a methodology to take a lot of survey data about people, assessments, and turn it into a mathematical formula that allows us to compare resilience levels and then predict risk factors and sort of do it one-to-one or for the entire workforce de-identified. So that's kind of what we do.
And you didn't mention this in there, but I know your work centers around like the mental well-being of people, because I know that these are very well connected. How can you connect the dots for us?
Yeah, I mean, that expression, like it's all in your head. Well, the point is, it kind of is like how you adapt, how you approach what's going on around you is, like 90% you and 10% what the stuff is. I mean, there's always, things are always going to be hard, and we can't change those things, but we can help people with their coping mechanisms, their agility, their resilience, so that they can have a successful outcome. And that's what we do. We upskill people based on the data we have to make them more resilient.
Well, we're not going to talk about the work you do with your clients as much, but we want to talk about the team, because we're here to talk about leadership and culture. And change is a constant across all of our organizations and industries. When you think about change, what do you think about that people don't understand about change that you wish they did?
Well, I think first of all, people definitely don't like change. Change is never over. That's like the main aha. It's constant, and I often say, to people that it's the number, that don't think that leaders aren't concerned with change, because they are always concerned with change. And what I see is that it's really, in today's environment, helping people get aligned so that they can quickly and with strength cope with change is probably one of the most important strategic advantages you can have, as a person, but also as a workforce.
Well, you said a big phrase right there, helping people get aligned. And as it relates to your team, because I'm assuming your company has changed over the years. You've been around for a dozen years. You have 100 people, and getting them aligned is a lot harder now than it was when you had, 10 people.
Absolutely. I mean, what you have to do, and I kind of think about it as companies grow. It's easy to be, it's easy to maneuver when you're 6 people. Because you can just go, hey, Gene, we have to spend more time on this tomorrow. And, Gene says, okay, let's do that. But, when you get that critical mass of people, you face challenges, and we did, of having to bring the new people along. I mean, we've, for the last few years, 4 years, we've kind of doubled our workforce pretty routinely. So how do you make sure the new people get it? And then how do you get everyone aligned so they can deal with change? And, it's almost like you want to stay being a speedboat, because once you become like a steamship and you're relying on levels of people to communicate, then it's harder to turn the boat. It's harder to communicate and impact, or deal with change.
So when we think about getting alignment, is there any specific leadership frameworks or tools that you use to help you tune into alignment or get people to find that alignment?
So for me, it absolutely has been the most important things are communication and trust. And let me unpack that for just a minute. What you want people, you need people to trust you as the leader and each other as the team. Because if you want to have people move quickly and lean in a new direction, they've got to trust each other. In order to do that, I have found that communication is one of the single most important and effective prerequisites for trust. When you are routinely, talking to people and letting them talk to you, so you're listening and they are listening, and you have that rapport of being able to speak frequently and candidly, that sets the groundwork for trust.
You mentioned trust, and I think a lot of organizations understand that trust is important, but sometimes it gets broken. And in our organizations, and I don't know if you've faced this or not, and I'm not looking for the sort of details, but what are your perspectives on how do you rebuild trust once it has been broken? I'm going to say at the team level, not necessarily the leader level.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you can shed a light on for that?
I find that the thing that breaks trust the most, like the thing that I most often hear is, why didn't you tell us?
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is, but we did. And that means that not that you didn't communicate, but that you didn't over communicate. And you
Right.
didn't, because sometimes it takes people a while to understand what we're all, what we're doing or what we're talking about. And I find that my job as a leader, of my business, is I have to be willing to tirelessly communicate. Because when the trust gets broken, I think it's often that people feel, surprised, in the dark, they didn't understand. So I take that as a failure. A failure of trust often comes from a failure of communication.
Now, Jan just said the words over communicate. I love the fact that these words are being used, but I don't love that word choice. And it's not any reflection on what she's doing, because I think we all use this. I've used this many, many times before. If you're going through some change, over communicate. I think there's a better word choice. The one thing that I encourage my clients to do is, how do you communicate explicitly? Which means, how do you communicate in a way that can't be misunderstood? That means you have to do things very clearly, concisely. You have to repeat yourself probably a lot more than you want. And it may feel like over communication, but I'd like to change the language of that, because explicit communication is how to communicate in a way that can't be misunderstood. Now, a lot of my clients will come to me and say, you know what, I don't know about this person on my team, or I don't know about this person that's a peer to me, or I don't know about this person that is above me, below me. It doesn't matter. The question is not blaming them. The question is, how do you communicate in a way that can't be misunderstood? If you answer that question and you try different things, my experience is you'll get to the bottom of it. Back to Jan. I agree with that. Jan, we were talking about, finding team alignment. What would we see across your organization? Is there rituals, or is there things that you guys use, whether it be data or scorecards or things like that help you find team alignment?
We have stuff like that. We have KPIs and a weekly net scorecards. We have something that we call meQ Central. I love it. I'm continually surprised by how much information is on there. I mean, basically any data, it's an internal site where all the metrics, everything's there, how we're doing, and even stuff like core sales presentation and who works for whom, and all this other stuff. I mean, we're very, very, we are kind of information driven. But I would say that that's all great. But for me, I think the thing that we really have practiced, and that that I think really there's an art to doing this, and you can't start too soon, is we have a weekly town hall. I'll just get it out there. We started that during the pandemic. We started it on like March 27th, 2020 or something like that. At the time, I had no idea that we'd be doing it weekly. And I had no idea we'd be doing it weekly for now more than 3 years.
Yeah.
But we never miss it. We rarely miss it. If I have to be away, someone stands in for me, that's fine. But the point is that the weekly communication sets a stage for people to talk, for people to say how they feel, and for people to express, the good, the bad, the question marks, whatever.
I love that. How long is the weekly town hall?
It's 30 minutes.
Okay. Is there an element in there that you feel like we can't live without?
Well, we have over the years, we've developed a very, a fixed cadence to what we do. I mean, I often talk about, I often talk about what's going on in the world, in our business, sort of a cold open for the most part for a few minutes, but that usually gets people talking, especially when, and we've lived through this for 3 years, when something outrageous is happening, in the world, like just when you think you couldn't have anything else to get you more stressed, something else happens. And things like that. So, but beyond that, there's often, routinely, new product releases are shared and discussed. New product releases that are early, that are late, that we had to, we over delivered, sales results. And then there's things like anniversaries and birthdays, and also every new employee gets to be introduced and tells us a fun fact about themselves, things like that. There's monthly financial reports and whatever else we need to do. There's business, there's fun, there's the world, and then there's a lot of sharing about what's going on in the business.
Well, I appreciate you telling us a look behind the scenes.
More than you want to know.
Well, I'm always curious about how people are doing this, because I think a lot of the audience would go, I can't believe we do this weekly, because they haven't organized, or they have a lot of ineffective meetings. And again, we don't want to go to ineffective meetings, but a meeting that keeps people aligned together is not ineffective to me. And so, Jan, when we were started talking about this, like the change that we go through as organizations, I don't know if there's a story of, changes that you guys have endured. I'm sure through the pandemic, there was some change that was going on, but this is fairly constant in our organizations. How are you guys helping employees anticipate the coming changes that are on the horizon?
Well, first of all, I won't talk about meQ too much, but our business is helping people cope with change. And what I know from our IP, and the science is pretty incontrovertible, Gene, is that that these are, resilience is a set of skills that people can learn. It's not a personality type. You're not like born that way. And skills, I like to say, and I'm going to get to our company, but what we do is commonly help people and organizations develop the ability to have a very clear-eyed view of what's going on around them, and what are the risk factors, not to be emotional about it, not to use, the context of last year's, last recession, or last this, or last that. It's like, what do we know about today? And what can then we do with our behavior to affect that? Now, which means that we need to be, very emotionally intelligent, very, manage our impulses, be very quantitative, at the same time, be very able to summon empathy, believe in our visions, find that purpose, help everyone find their purpose. These are the kinds of things that help people deal with, change, and defining moments often come out of change. For us, I think that, like so many other businesses, 2020, we sent everyone home, and we had to turn very quickly as we were learning how to communicate remotely. We had to think about how to take care of our customers who were going through unbelievable changes, changes in the way they work, changes in the way some people had to keep going into the office, in very sort of unsafe environments, physically unsafe. Some people had to change, supply chain, and, redirect their whole businesses. These are massive undertakings that companies have done. And my learning is that by helping people, dial up those skills, as I was talking about, they have a better opportunity to address the change. And, in the long run, for us, it ended up significantly expanding our product.
Fantastic. I am just curious, how would you frame in your leadership style of growing a company to your size?
My leadership style, I would call myself, I have a very paradoxical leadership style. How about that? I think I am extremely quantitative but very intuitive. I'm this mix of rational and intuitive. I also think that I can be in times of crisis, highly, emotionally sort of detached, really unemotional, but highly empathetic, which I think you have to do. Especially in times like this, so many growth companies are facing a sea change because of capital markets, because changes in interest rates, access to capital, and they've had to run their businesses in very different ways. We have faced that. We have been, I have watched, people say to us, grow at any cost, and literally a month later say, can you be financially independent for the rest of time? And that requires a very nimble leadership style and management team.
Yeah.
And these are exactly the kind of skills that will help people do that.
Well, Jan, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your sharing your wisdom.
You're welcome.
Wow, I love this interview. One of the things that she said in here, I'm going to have to go into my notes, but was just perfect about resilience. Like, resilience is something that can be learned. It's not something that is a personality trait. And so when you think about that, then you know that you can create resilience across your organization with people that aren't truly demonstrating or don't have it naturally. I think I have a little bit of natural resilience. Maybe it's just because I've been through so much crap, if you will, but you can actually lead people to a higher level of resilience when you understand it, and you can have the kind of conversations. Now, to me, this is unlocked through coaching. Jan's MQ has different ways of doing that. You can find out what works best for you, but if there's any way we can serve you, make sure you reach out to us at genehammett.com. And when you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.